Hey everyone, welcome back. So for this video, I'm going to be making the white layers that's going to hold the fabric tree on my Christmas card. And so for this step of the process, we're going to do it in two parts. First, the prepping the fabric and then cutting the fabric. And so for the prepping, we're going to need a few things, starting with my heat press, some mid-weight fusible interfacing, and of course, some fabric. So I've got some new fabric that I've bought, but I've also got a ton from my stash, just using up some scraps. So I'm selecting light colored and white based fabrics for this because the base of the card is going to be red. So I think today we're just going to work on a small scrap. Let's see. Let's do that one. Okay, and this has been sitting in my stash for quite a while, so I'm going to press it first just so it doesn't have all these creases in it. I'm going to do that using my heat press just as an iron. I know this isn't like the intended use for it, but I feel like it's so much easier than getting out my big iron, or I have a mini iron too, but this just covers such a nice big surface and it's easy to use. All right, let me grab my base. And this one's got some pretty deep creases in it, so what I've got to remedy that is I've got a tiny little spray bottle of water, and I'm just going to spritz this a little bit. And hopefully that will help release some of these wrinkles. I feel like if there's a few wrinkles in it, I don't mind, but I don't want it to be super wrinkly. Okay. Yeah, that's helping. All right, so that looks pretty good. I might do one more quick little spritz just because the few creases still on the front here. I'm going to iron the front side too, although I mean that's probably not great for my press getting water right directly on it, but it's fine. Okay, so now that that's pretty flat enough to make me happy, next step is applying the interfacing. So for this, I've got a piece cut out already just from other ironing I've done. What I want to do is get it to be about the same size as my fabric. It's a little hanging over on both sides. Let's see what it's like this way. Yeah, I think I'm going to do it this way and then just cut it to shape. All right, so there I've got it laid on top of my fabric. Just grab some scissors and trim it down to size. These scissors are terrible. Where did I put my fabric scissors? Oh well. Interfacing's easy to cut. Be careful not to cut through your piece of fabric, which I think I'm doing a little bit. Oh, not too bad. Okay. So most of the time when you're using interfacing, it'll tell you to cut it, 1/8 from the edge of your fabric, but that's to accommodate seams. I want this whole thing to be pretty firm, so I'm going to do it right up to the edge as much as I can. All right, and then the next thing is to apply some heat to this to fuse the interfacing to my fabric. Make sure you've got kind of the rough edge of or rough side of the interfacing up against the wrong side of your fabric. And then all you have to do is apply heat. When you buy interfacing, it'll come with instructions wrapped around it, depending on how you buy it. It might be on the package, it might be wrapped around the bolt. I'm not actually going to follow these exactly since I know I'm going to sew this all down. The interfacing is going to be attached on the edges, so I'm not like super concerned about it coming loose in the middle. I'm just going to get it applied as quickly as I can, so I'm just going to apply heat to it and it'll bond well enough for my purposes. The instructions tell you to do it a little more carefully, applying it with steam. I'm just going to do it dry. Do as I say, not as I do. I don't know, but this will work for what I need. So I'm just going to take my heat press and slowly go across my fabric and bond them together. All right. This is probably good enough. I usually go over it a couple times just to make sure it's somewhat adhered. Let it cool off a little bit, although my fingertips are deadened from handling hot glue. So I have picked this up, kind of make sure that the interfacing is stuck. It looks like it is. And so that is all we need to do for this step. Okay, so I've swapped my pressing mat out for a cutting mat, and I'm going to start cutting this piece of fabric down to size for my, I think I used to call this the layer 2 of my Christmas card. So that's going to be like the white base that I sew my tree onto. And I mentioned in my last video, I lost my notebook with all my measurements in it. So I have them written here. So what I'm going to be cutting now is these 3 3/4 inch by 5 inch pieces. And I've kind of mapped this out. And I think the best way for me to do it is a row of tall ones here, if that makes sense. So the 5 inch strip, and then a 3 3/4 inch strip here. So I'm going to cut my piece into 2 strips and then cut those strips into my bases. So first things first, I'm going to square off one of these edges. So for that, I'm going to get my longer quilting ruler. I'm going to just eyeball this. Oops, I've got this upside down, which you maybe can't tell from the video, but I did. So I'm going to cut it as close to the edge as I can, because it's going to be a pretty tight fit to get all those pieces. Okay. All right. And so I've got that edge nice and squared off. And now let me cut. I think we're going to do the 3 3/4 inch strip here. And I'm going to use my big square quilting ruler. And I'm going to have to do this in kind of 2 runs because it's not long enough to cover the entire length of the fabric. I do have one somewhere that would work better for this, but I don't want to spend the time to dig it up. So I'm just going to be careful about what I'm doing and use this one, because I can just shift it as long as I'm making sure I'm cutting on the same line. So I'm going to start by cutting this section of it, and always cut away from you when you're using a rotary cutter. If you're not using it, put your safety back on. I'm not always the best about that, but it is a lot safer to do it that way. And then I'm going to line this again up with my 3 3/4 inches. So I've got, oops, I don't know if you can quite see that, 3 inches out to the 3/4 line, and I'm lining it up with this measurement right here through the transparent ruler. Okay. And then I'm just kind of making sure that, yeah, that is the line I was cutting on, which it is. And I'll continue my cut. Okay. So there's my 3 3/4 inch strip. I'm going to put that to the side, and then I'm going to measure this one out to 5, which I think should just fit. Let's see if I measured right when I was kind of mapping out my fabric. Oh yeah, that's just about right. So there we are on the 5 inch line, and there's just a teeny tiny overhang on this end. So we're going to get our money's worth out of this piece of fabric. Oops, I went a little far over the edge, so there might be a little bit of a boo-boo right there, but that's okay. I'm going to have plenty of pieces in the end, so if one has a little nick out of it, that'll be okay. And actually, looks fine. Okay. Finish that. Okay, so there's our 5 inch piece. So now I'm going to go through and cut this into 3 3/4 inch chunks this way. So first thing, oops, square off my end, just making sure I'm lining up each edge with a line on the ruler to make sure you make this cut straight. And see there, that was not very safe. I was gesturing around my open rotary cutter. So don't do what I do, guys. Like, don't cut yourself. I've gotten lucky that I haven't, but be safe. Okay, so now I'm going to measure these out to 3 3/4 inches. Cut. Cut. And this is not a super thick thing I'm cutting through, so I don't have to press too hard, but you do want to be firm, and you want to hold the ruler down nice and firm, because that will make sure the ruler doesn't slip while you're cutting. Okay, so there's 4 pieces of the right size, and now we're going to do the same thing with this one, only we're going to cut 5-inch chunks. So first things first, square off the end. And I always try to do it as close as I can right to the end, just so I can have as much fabric to work with as I can. All right, and lining it up with the 5-inch line. There's a piece. All right, and so there are my, oops, close your rotary cutter. There are my 7 pieces of fabric for my bases for my trees that I'm going to sew in a little bit. And then we'll have some Christmas magic to do a bunch more. So that is it for this video. Stay tuned for the next steps.